Since the White Sox will not spend much this offseason, the GM is banking on the players who have helped the team be this historically bad, help them get better next season. Let's discuss if any of them are pieces that the club can build with next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at SouthsideShowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, it's been announced by GM Chris Getz and confirmed by USA Today's Bob Nightingale that the Sox will not spend much this offseason despite being historically awful. Instead, the plan is to move forward with the young players and the few veterans that they have under contract or club control. Joining me to discuss if there are any players on the roster that you can realistically use long-term, along with who the next manager should be and what it's like at the ballpark, is from the 108.com's BeefLoaf, one of the probably biggest White Sox fans that I have come to know, and even Rob Hart has endorsed that you are the biggest White Sox fan, you, Torrezi, and my Sox Somber.
Appreciate that, guys. Appreciate that from Rob and from you as well, Todd. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, all right. So, Beef, you have kept a spreadsheet of players because you being the accountant, you have keep a lot of spreadsheets.
I do.
So, of players that you feel can be long-term solutions. So, let's start with the perceived strength of the team and the starting rotation. Who do you have in that rotation for 2025 and beyond?
You know, what's funny, Todd, is I do keep this spreadsheet, and I'll put little clips of it out on Twitter of what I call the core. Now, the threshold to making it, though, onto this list is you have to have actually performed in the major leagues. So I don't, a lot of people will tell me, oh, you got to put Colson Montgomery on there, you got to put Noah Schultz, but I don't put anyone until they've actually come up. They've had a certain amount of plate appearances and starts, and some people float back off the list too if they struggle a bit. So out of the starting pitchers for me, obviously a no-brainer is Garrett Crochet, but you don't really know if Garrett Crochet is going to be here. In fact, if I were a betting man, I would say Garrett Crochet is going to be finding a new home this winter. I would say he's probably the most likely trade candidate for the White Sox, especially if they're going to stick to Getz's proclamation that they're not going to play heavy in free agent. There are ways to improve the team. One of them would be making a trade with Crochet, and so I would assume, even though obviously he's the ace of the staff, he would be a number one on the list. Is that out of the starting pitchers is a guy who would be a foundational piece, but I think he's going to turn into some other pieces that they hope are foundational pieces.
All right, so has Jonathan Cannon and Davis Martin also qualified then for your core?
They have. They actually have. Davis Martin, a little bit on the strength of his performance in 2022. And then just seeing kind of the rebound of now, because the second half of 2022, he came up. He was kind of a big surprise. He kind of shot through. He wasn't really a prospect for the White Sox. He picked up miles per hour, and then he had to show up and start in the second half of that year. And he actually pitched really well. The numbers won't really show up because in the season finale of 2022 against the Minnesota Twins, he got lit up. That was a game he got hurt in. They kind of let him wear a little too much there. Comes back this year. He picks up the spike changeup. And he looks like he's back to form kind of immediately off of Tommy John surgery. So Davis Martin is definitely in there. Jonathan Cannon, I really like. I didn't think I was going to like Jonathan Cannon, but he shows up. He's got the big flowing blonde locks, Todd. He throws a lot of strikes. He pounds the strike zone. He's a big guy, but he doesn't strike out that many people. He doesn't really even throw necessarily that hard. He can ramp it up a little bit. But the command is what we're looking for here. And as a White Sox fan, it's nice to have a guy who actually, that's his main concern, to pounding the strike zone there. I think a better defense behind him would make Jonathan Cannon could really push the limits on what he has there. But for me, yes, he would be a guy in that rotation. I think if I was saying it right now, what I think is going to happen, I think Davis Martin is the opening day starter in 2025. I think that's kind of like what the group's going to look like. I think they'll trade Crochet, and then Davis Martin's the oldest guy there. He's 27, so I think he ends up being the opening day starter.
Also, he's probably Brian Bannister next to Eric Fetty, probably Bannister's best success project so far by buying into, hey, we're going to get you this changeup and then throw it a lot.
Right.
Did Drew Thorpe qualify yet for the core, or did the injury kind of towards the end, where he struggled, did that kind of knock him off your core?
Yeah, so I had him solidly in there. I had him solidly like, okay, this guy is a future piece. Then he had the two bad starts right before he was injured. He noted kind of right before he had surgery that he was feeling it during those starts. So I'm going to kind of give him a mulligan there. And so for me, yes, he would be, assuming he shows up healthy to spring training and there's no ramifications, no holding him back on innings or anything. Yeah, he would 100% be in that group. So even if you think of Garrett Crochet being traded off of this team, I think there are still three solid starting pitchers in Drew Thorpe, Jonathan Cannon, and Davis Martin to start out with here for the White Sox. And none of them are world beaters, but all of them, I think, have the ability to be solid mid-rotation guys.
And that's what you need to be competitive. I mean, look at the Cleveland Guardians. It's not, they've had their aces, but they've also just had very solid arms, and that's what you got to compete with. Who's in the core in the infield? And I bet you it's going to be the guy that I'm going to die on the hill next year, Andrew Vaughn, all-star. Come on.
Andrew Vaughn is the only remaining one. Now, he's kind of an interesting spot because I put guys on this list also for longevity or under contract control, whatever. Andrew Vaughn is in RB 2 next year. And so I don't know what that raise is going to specifically be. He's inching up towards 20 home runs. Some of the counting stats are starting to come through after having a really horrendous first 6 weeks, 2 months of the season. It depends on pricing there. I don't know if this regime is tied to him as the prior regime since they drafted him. And so I don't know if they're going to say $5 million is too much of an arbitration raise and they decide that they move on from him. My thought is they probably will hold on to him at least for one more year and put him there. I wouldn't mind seeing them have him just dedicate himself to DH. Just hit. We'll pull you out of the field a little bit because having watched Gavin Sheets play first versus Vaughn play first, and not that Vaughn's a bad first baseman, it's just Sheets with his length, it seems to get to more throws over to first. It seems to be like a little easier move there. If the White Sox wanted to go out and get, I don't think they're going to keep Gavin Sheets. I think there's room there for someone to fill in. I talked to Ian Eskridge last night from Future Sox, and his thought is maybe Tim Elko could slide up. But even if they don't want to do that, the White Sox can go out and get a first baseman that either has a ton of power or is a solid glove man there, and maybe let Andrew Vaughn just focus on hitting and be the DH. But currently right now, he's legitimately the only infielder that I would give a spot to this second and say they're most definitely in there a foundational piece. There are other guys that are on the periphery, but the decision, it's tough to make at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's still too early for Brian Ramos. He's probably the first prospect that I've been cautiously optimistic, and I said this on yesterday's show, since Maglio Ordonez. I know they play, infielder, outfielder, but knowing the Sox will be dumb enough to move him to the outfield because, hey, we got to get Miguel Vargas in there. And then speaking of the outfield, obviously I'm going to assume, and if he's not traded, Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Benintendi financial sense, has Dominic Fletcher, glove god, has he earned core status?
To me, Fletcher has not earned core status yet. He is on the roster though. Like I've got the levels of, okay, this is a guy who is definitely, he's going to play and all that. Fletcher is a guy who is definitely on the roster for me, whereas I think Ramos is also on the roster for me in 2025. But to me, I'm not 100% sure that like their spot is carved out for him. Here's my problem, Todd. I love Dominic Fletcher, and I sit right behind Dominic Fletcher. So I get to watch his excellence on defense. And he's really, he's got good closing speed. He gets great jumps. His arm is absolutely terrific and accurate in the outfield. And it's a rare thing because the White Sox have had such a hard time filling right field. And when they do manage to fill it with someone, they're usually lousy out there. And we were big Daniel Palka fans in 108. He did not deserve to have a glove on. All right? The hitting part was the only part he should have been doing. With Fletcher, though, there's just no power. Absolutely no power. So even when he puts together good plate appearances, the ISO is hovering in the 060 range, and he just doesn't get anything out of those plate appearances. So even though I think he's fine with regards to his approach and everything, never getting to any power puts you in a tough spot to use that kind of guy in right field with a team that's so desperate for home runs that just could use any injection of power into the roster. That's why I'm not totally objecting to them giving Ramos some run in the outfield, because I start to see the pipeline of people that are coming up, and a lot of them are infielders in the White Sox system. And I don't know, I don't know if Miguel Vargas is going to make it. It doesn't look so good so far. I don't know if Colson Montgomery is really a shortstop. If there is a guy who's athletic enough and can handle moving around a bit out of that group, the younger group, it's probably Ramos, and he's mentally tough enough to do it too. And so I wouldn't close the door on all that for, potentially doing that. But Fletcher, as much as I love him, and I really like watching him play right field, not quite yet on my core.
So you're saying he's Adam Engel.
Pretty much, right?
And no power on the right field. I will not take this Lance Johnson slander, because remember, he played some right field too. He was no pop, all stolen bases, my friend.
He was. Hey, if Dominic Fletcher could play center field like the one dog could, we would be having this conversation, because it'd be an easy transition. If the White Sox do trade Luis and you move him to center field, and great, he's the glove center fielder guy. And Lance Johnson had some great years in center field with high batting averages and on base percentages. I just don't think in this era Fletcher's going to be able to kind of have those years,
right,
and be able to produce enough in right field to do it. If he shows that he can play center field, which looked a little iffy when he filled in for Luis, so I'm not 100% sure there. Then he's an obvious guy. But right now, I think he's your fourth outfielder, or by default, he's to be playing right field on opening day if they don't decide to make any sort of move there.
All right, so I always want to get every guest's take on who the next manager should be, and I want to get Beef's take after the break, because he is probably one of the biggest White Sox fans you'll ever meet, and he's also one of the best White Sox content people you will ever meet. So let's discuss that next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, you've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, FanDuel has something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. FanDuel is excellent for futures, props, and parlays. Got enough evidence on who to lock in as your pick for the World Series? FanDuel has some good lines on where you can even triple a $10 bet on the plus 320 Los Angeles Dodgers. Even $10 on the New York Yankees at plus 500 would yield you $50. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And the White Sox have one more homestand, and there's a possibility the Sox could break the 1962 New York Mets record for the most defeats in a 162-game season at home. So if you want to witness that terrible history in person, I suggest you use the Game Time app. But if you prefer to shift to going to a Chicago Bears game, the Game Time app makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Pick filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks even offers some awesome deals from time to time, like how they had a 50% off tickets this past Labor Day for the Dodgers and Diamondbacks game. The lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. Who? And the White Sox and Los Angeles Angels finished a three-game set today. The first pitch is at 3:07 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts, as Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. Love to be, I'd like to think I'd be an excellent audio companion when you're mowing the lawn, sitting in traffic. Another guy who's an excellent audio companion is BeefLoaf at From the 108. And Beef, where we know each other well enough through our interactions through Twitter where I can call you Beef. Is that okay?
You can call me Beef. You can call me Loaf. You can call me BeefLoaf. You can call me Mr. Delicious, which is my handle on Twitter. Any of those will work fine, Todd. That's right.
And again, where can we find all your outstanding content?
You can find everything I do at FromThe108.com. We also have a YouTube page at From the 108 where all of our podcasts, and including the Sunday Soak, which is just a hot tub video that we do on Home Sunday, so it's not in podcast form. But my solo podcast called The Au Jus is there, and then also the From the 108 podcast, which streams live Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Central Time, can also be found on our YouTube channel. So FromThe108.com or YouTube at From the 108.
And again, I love all the content that you guys produce because it's not just White Sox content, it's other content too, music, movies, that type of stuff. All the stuff that White Sox fans would love. Again, these are basically your drunk uncles, and that's what I love about you guys.
That's correct.
And I do mean when I said that, you, Teresi, and My Sox Summer are some of the best White Sox content creators out there, not just sucking up. I really enjoy your guys' work.
Appreciate that.
And I hope that you guys come on the show again after this. So
Absolutely.
I got a long off season to fill too.
It's going to be a long one. Yeah, I agree.
All right. So before I ask for your pick as the team's next manager, what characteristics do you hope to see in the Sox next skipper?
This is a great question, the characteristics question. I also want to talk a little bit about process too, Todd, because I think there's something out there that people are missing. Number one, I think that for me, the main characteristics, I would prefer a manager that's a little younger, has definitely been a former player. I think one of the things we kind of realize is managers that weren't players kind of got hired is they would end up in these situations, the delicate situations with the team where maybe not necessarily being able to see eye to eye or have the empathy of having gone through a bad streak as an actual player and be able to coach them up. I think there is a feel of if you've actually been in there in that dugout playing, that would help. I'm not totally against someone that didn't play, but that would be my preference. And younger as well, just more recent to the game, because the game has changed a lot in the last 20, 30 years, and not just from an information standpoint, where the front offices feed a lot of analytics to the manager, and it's not just the manager making kind of all decisions. It's kind of a group of the front office making a lot of the decisions. But it's also just the gameplay is a lot different. It's just a very different ballgame than it used to be. It's a lot of home run and nothing, a lot of strikeouts, and it just plays different. So I think from that perspective, that's the type of person I want. One thing though that I've been thinking a lot, and it keeps going through my head, Todd, is I'm not really that worried about what specific choice the White Sox make. And the reason why is because it's tough across demographics of managers with experience levels and ages and everything to determine a pattern of what is successful for a major league team, because it literally sprays to all fields. And that's a weird thing about modern baseball, where they're solving kind of a lot of things, but the manager piece doesn't get solved. And the White Sox just went out before the 2023 season. They did a very thorough process. They interviewed a ton of people. They reached out to everyone, and they interviewed people who were main people on lists. People who got jobs other places came in and interviewed here, and they ended up with Pedro Grifol. And one of the things that it made me realize is it's like picking a manager in any vocation. You don't always know the best person who's gonna, who the doers are and who can do the jobs well. But when it comes to managing the people, it's tough to pick out of the doers. You don't know which one's going to be which. So I just hope that the White Sox, whoever they pick, if it's wrong, fail quick and get rid of the person. Get them out the door and turn it over. They could have done it quicker with Pedro, but they did it quick enough with Pedro. Like, there's still a lot of time left in the contract. They got rid of him. Just if we get to the next guy they select, it doesn't work, nip it in the bud, get rid of the guy.
And that's why the next person's contract should be 2 years and an option year. I mean, honestly,
Agreed.
that would make the most sense. And I've got this hypothesis too, is what you really want to be looking for is with the way that front offices can now basically put together a lineup card for you. I want a manager that can manage a clubhouse, because that's what basically they need to be, is to actually, they're there every day. So they're basically almost an HR person. Plus, I want them to be able to win the game in front of them. I know it's a long season, but I want somebody that focuses on 162. So what I want, one of the things that I do kind of like with what Chris Getz is doing is yes, there should be a actual head of pitching like Brian Bannister, and there should be a head of hitting for the entire system. So everybody's playing the same baseball. And yes, that manager should contribute to, hey, this is what I think, and that a collaborative effort. But I want the manager and the coaching staff to only focus on winning that freaking game in front of them. That's it.
Tonight's game, exactly.
That's it. And yes, if they're struggling, you can give another opinion. But otherwise, it's Brian Bannister's job or it's the hitting guru's job to help everybody else and the fielding guru's job. You have those three people in place, and all the manager is doing is just in charge of winning that game.
That's why I love it. No, I love it 100%. And you mentioned like control the clubhouse, and you're kind of also in charge of PR as the manager. And that was one of Pedro's big faults is when he was communicating to us, the fan, through the beat or whatever, he was very poor at it. And it made him seem worse at his managing job, which I'm sure he wasn't that great at either, given the results. But we might have looked at him more fondly had he been a better communicator. Now, we've had a little snippet of Grady Sizemore here. He's a former player, whatever. And I'm not saying he should get the job next year, but he's a much better communicator with people. When he tells the fans something, the fans listen, and there's some empathy, and they're like, okay, cool. Like, that is what it is. You need someone a little more along those lines from the communication standpoint. I agree with you, both in that clubhouse and then also to us outside of it.
Yeah, I don't want a manager that's peeing on my leg and telling me it's not raining like Pedro was doing. That's what I love about Grady Sizemore. Okay, who do you want to be the next manager of the Chicago White Sox?
Okay, put me on the spot. I actually wrote a blog about this back in June when it was looking not great. Or actually, it was in May. When it was looking not great, it was looking like, well, we might be out of a manager fairly soon. My three candidates that I listed here, one is an internal guy. He's taken the Birmingham Barons to the playoffs. And actually, when he's managed elsewhere in the minors, he's been a playoff manager. Former White Sox Sergio Santos is a guy that I really like. What I've heard from him, I like. He's in the organization, so he knows a lot of the young players that have come up through the system. So a lot of the guys that are going to be on the team, especially if the White Sox are going to stay internal, he's got rapport with those groups. He's known Getz and these other guys for a while. So that to me is a decent fit if you're going to go with an internal candidate. If you're going to go kind of outside the box, I like Benji Gill. He was he's a former player. He was the manager of Team Mexico. And he has had other managerial jobs, and he's had MLB bench coaching jobs. I don't think he currently has a MLB coaching job right now. But to me, it was like an idea of like, well, if the White Sox are going to just like throw a dart somewhere that's avant-garde, that's where I would go. I think the dream candidate for me would be someone like Will Venable, though. He's the bench coach in Texas. And a lot of people thought, and he's got great pedigree. He worked under Theo Epstein with the Cubs, so he's had some front office work. And then obviously he's right behind Bochy in Texas. A lot of people thought he's just going to wait for that job and wait for Bochy to roll off. But the Texas Rangers aged pretty quickly this year, and not all of the prospects came along. And like the World Series team, it's a big hangover season. So I'm curious to see kind of what happens there. If Bochy thinks he's going to stay for a little bit, and if this team doesn't kind of ascend back up, maybe Will Venable will get a little itchy trigger finger and want to jump to a place where he would have a little more free reign, I guess, here in Chicago. My guess would be he would mesh well. Although I think it's unlikely someone that hot of a candidate would choose this situation. I could be wrong.
Man, I think those are three actual outside of the box names that I really, I've heard Sergio Santos' name. I remember I think it was I forgot who I had on back in July when it looked like he was about to be canned. I think that would be a good candidate. The only thing and that's the other thing that I didn't like when Chris Getz said going outside the organization. I do want to be like, you do have one guy that left the organization and washed the stink off of himself. So before he came back, so
right.
that would be the one guy that I'd be like, you know what, maybe you might want to take an interview with him just to see what his vision is. And it might fit into, again, my hypothesis. You again could have your director of fielding, hitting, and pitching, and there's Sergio Santos, who obviously has been at the minors, that could know how to collaborate with these guys. So right. I like those. I like those names. And Benji Gill, I swear, did he play with the Brewers? That's a former Brewer. That's a former Red name.
He was a journeyman. Yeah, he played for a lot of teams. Like it's one of those guys where you'll have to look up to get all the teams that he played for. That's right.
I swear I covered him with the Brewers. I know that. And Will Venables, I like that name too. That guy was also a replacement level player. Him and Kevin Mensch, I swear. Like when you thought about replacement level player, it went from Kevin Mensch to Will Venables.
And Venables got the pedigree, man. He's done some front office work and everything. So like it's kind of like sometimes you like to see the manager to be having done a little front office, so they kind of understand the workings. They understand what's going to be coming down. They understand the information coming through, and they've already pondered how to communicate it to the team. So it could be a fit. But I would assume someone like him, he has a little bit of cachet. He'll probably settle for a better job.
Yeah, and I mean, Grady Sizemore, to me, I think he needs to become, and I say this with all due respect, and I said this, I believe, when I had another guest on, he needs to just become the snitch. And there's nothing wrong with that. He becomes the front office liaison. You have a guy that works the front office and the manager. So that would be an ideal role for him. So Beef, his brother Torrezi, and the other founding member from the 108 My Sox Summer have witnessed a lot of White Sox losing this season in person. And I want to get BeefLoaf's take on how it has been at the ballpark next on Locked On White Sox. All right, for most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Luka or Ellie or a Patrick Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. I loved collecting cards as a kid, but that's some serious money to drop even back in the late 80s when I was collecting cards. Thanks to slab picks from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that I listed was a hit from last week's Arena Club slab pick drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab picks are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and an explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform that you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonmlb, code LOCKEDONMLB for 10% off your first purchase. And the White Sox and Los Angeles Angels finished a 3-game set today. The first pitch is at 3:07 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter, here along with from the 108's BeefLoaf. And when I had your co-founders on last month, they described a dreary scene at Guaranteed Rate Field. How would you describe the ballpark environment during this trying season, especially after, 16 straight home losses?
Yeah, I mean, it is dreary, and it's emptier and emptier as the games go on, especially the weeknight games, Todd. There's just not a lot of people filtering through the ballpark, and it is kind of a somber, we expect to lose as fans. Like, even if we get the lead, we expect something to go wrong, and, even especially being at the game against the Rangers where Andrew Vaughn should have had the walk-off home run, and Travis Jankowski jumps over the fence and yanks the home run back. Like, that's just the stuff that has been happening to us all this year. I will say, though, this past weekend against Oakland, we were calling it the funeral game on the Saturday night. We had the big tailgate with Chicago Sports Bums. There was a lot more energy in the ballpark. Just kind of like one last, because it's the final weekend of the home season. There's no more home games. There's going to be one more series, but it's the middle of the week. And so I think people were getting out for one last time, just kind of saying goodbye to baseball, coming out to the ballpark. And it helped that the White Sox won a couple games. But otherwise, it's been the most trying season. We talked on Sunday, me and the boys, after we did the Sunday soak, and we were all like, we're glad we're done going to games. Like, we're tired. We're exhausted now from all this.
Yeah. So this actually should have been the year that I've gone to a game, because I have the superstition. Like, I used to go to a bunch of games, and then in 2005, for some reason, I didn't go. And the White Sox won the World Series. So obviously I go in 2006, and they don't go to the World Series. I go in 2007. They have that terrible year. I go in 2006. I go in 2007. They have that terrible year with all the injuries. So I don't go in 2008. And guess what they do? They win the division. So I've been convinced I'm the bad luck, even though I think the last game I've gone to was like 2015, but it's still a great time. And being someone that grew up on the South Side, if I remember listening to your biographical podcast, Au, how do you feel when people give the neighborhood a bad rap? Because I've never felt not safe, because here's a secret. Wear White Sox gear. You'll be fine.
It's funny. I used to get upset by such things And there was a time when Bridgeport was a little tougher neighborhood than it currently is in the surrounding parts around the ballpark. But if you just go to like any of the Zillow or whatever, and you check out the home values in and around the ballpark, and you'll realize that it's not anywhere close to being a scary place to be like ever. To be honest with you, I feel much safer by Sox Park than I do Wrigley Field, just because as you get a little further out of Wrigley Field, it can get a little sketchy. But right around Sox Park is I don't worry about it these days. But when I was a younger man, it used to fire me up like, this is my neighborhood and you're talking about all this stuff, but not anymore. I'm at peace with it now, Todd.
Yeah, even though you got an owner that was demanding that magic bullet was fired for that because
a little shooting. It's Chicago. Yeah. We got a little shooting. It's okay.
Yeah, and I love how it was like, well, it came from outside because I haven't forbidden my security firm missed that.
He said it came from 42nd and Wells. So the next day, my daughter and I, my daughter's 14, we drove over to 42nd and Wells, which is obviously not that far from us. And we're like, we're sitting in the car and we're looking, we're like, no way. No way. Get out of here. This got to be lies.
And I was waiting for Jerry to announce that he found the second gunman on the grassy knoll.
Exactly.
So how does one find a way to have fun at the ballpark when their favorite team is likely to lose?
Just make sure you can bring some friends out with you, because that's what it ends up becoming for us. It's hanging out with our friends, having a couple beers, gabbing during the game, talking about either things that are going on out there or just things that are going on in people's lives. Tailgating is still a great option, and like I said, we did it on Saturday with the Chicago Sports Bums. We even brought an inflatable casket that was a cooler, and we walked it in there, like the Coffin Boys for the funeral game. And so just get together with some friends, grab a couple beers, and and chop it up. And that's a great way to enjoy the game. The White Sox have actually started hitting home runs again, which they hadn't for a long time. That's another thing that makes the games tough, Todd. We have a great home run ballpark, and when they go like 8 games and hit no home runs, that's really frustrating too for me.
Yeah, I don't know why they've been trying to be cute lately and be like, if we have a home run heavy team, we might go through a scoring drought. And I want to be like that. Yeah. But you know what you do? You like I always said, you get a couple of guys that are like Lance Johnson or Scott Pasenik that can get on base and that can create havoc. And then you get some power hitters that can take walks. It's amazing. I just want to be like, look at your 3 most before the rebuild. Look at your 3 most successful teams. How did they win? Replicate it, because that's where you play 81 games at.
And all those teams hit a lot of home runs. That's the formula.
By the way, who caught Andrew Benintendi's walk-off home run? Because I saw it land in the 108.
No one did, because it hit the foul pole. We all got up and we were all like, "Oh, it's coming right for us!" And it flicked the foul pole and didn't get all the way up to us. It kind of went in that area in between. Yeah, it didn't get there. Because I had a friend text me. He said, "How come you guys didn't catch that ball?" I'm like, it didn't get all the way out there to us. We were ready. Everyone was in position. Todd. I'm not catching on the fly, but on a bounce, I'll give it a shot.
All right. And finally, can you make a case for hope that the team will be competitive by, say, 2026, maybe 2026?
Oh yeah, yes. I actually feel really good about it, and it's different than the last time we did a rebuild. This time, like the last time, we were pinning our hopes on like a handful of guys that all of them, these guys would be superstars and they all have to hit. This group, there's not really a superstar amongst the group. I mean, you could say that Noah Schultz is probably the superstar. Maybe maybe Higgins Smith is, but like with Colson Montgomery sliding back a little bit, I think you just kind of have a lot more depth than we had last time. So you got a lot of potential happy surprises there, and so I think they get better faster than people think. I think 2026 is probably the year where you're like, wow, they're not that bad. Like they look like they might be ready for some free agents to come in here and kind of help this cause. So I'm hoping it's not that long. I think next year is going to be a tough year, but sooner than later.
Well, hey, if you want to add to a drinking game, I'm going to mention my Milwaukee Brewers, the NL team, the team that I live, 5 exits down from. They got competitive, but why? With starting pitching. I mean, they rode that. I mean, and if you can find starting pitching, that'll at least get you a chance to get in the games. And then, again, build a power lineup, and maybe you might have something. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about Jeff Passan's recent piece on ESPN.com, discussing some interesting changes being made in the front office. And I also want to go over SoxMachine.com's Jim Margulis's interesting insights about Passan's news. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion with BeefLoaf. And also, Beef, where can we find, again, your excellent content?
You can find us at FromThe108.com, at FromThe108 on Twitter, and YouTube page at FromThe108.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe. It's a great, they've got great podcasts. They got great content on the From the 108, and it's just a great Twitter follow because, yes, Twitter still exists, and it's still fun, at least if you pay attention to a certain segment called White Sox World and you ignore the trolls. Anyways, you can leave any comments at the episode page on YouTube, X formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On White Sox. Email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. And again, thank you, B, for joining me.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.